Hello, and welcome to the Transforming Loneliness interview series. I'm Laura Parker, the creator and host of the series. Transforming Loneliness approaches loneliness with fresh and unexpected ways of seeing and responding that cultivate connection, belonging, and love. Today, I'm thrilled to be with Jeannie Zandi. Jeannie Zandi is the director of Living as Love, a nonprofit organization dedicated to seeding a culture of the heart on the planet, inspiring, teaching, and supporting people to live from their essence as love. What I enjoy so much about Jeannie is her warmth, playfulness, and what I would call her radical inclusiveness. Hello, Jeannie, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Hi, Laura. Thank you for having me.
So, as I was preparing to meet with you, I found myself taking a moment to turn toward my own heart with gratitude for the courage and inspiration that led to this project. And I decided in that moment that I would share that with you, Jeannie, and with the audience. And then I felt immediate shyness and hesitation about being that open. And then there was this burst of compassion when I saw, oh, we all struggle with that. Like we all struggle with how to bring ourselves forward, how to share who we really are, how to be authentic and real and tender. So I just thought that was just a perfect opening for this meeting with you. So,
Beautiful.
yeah.
You know, the thing that immediately comes to mind is loneliness implies a need. It implies that something here is not all done or invulnerable or an island. And so just by virtue of talking about loneliness and admitting loneliness, we're entering into a mode that is not culturally sanctioned or culturally approved of, but it's a mode that it's a mode where transformation happens. It's a mode where openness and the openness of our hearts and our willingness can invite something else inside. We let our walls down when we admit loneliness.
It's so true, because I was reflecting just the other day about how there is this hesitation of saying those words in public. I'm lonely. It's like admitting that I have a infectious disease or something. Like how many people do you actually hear ever saying those words in public?
And I just have to comment on our masculine imbalanced culture within which the ideal is the ideal of the soldier, the ideal of invulnerability. And we all operate from this below our awareness and feel bad when we enter the realms of human experience that are outside of this soldier ideal. And yet these realms outside of that ideal are just as human and just as valid, and often the doorways to a deeper way of being here heartfully and connectedly. And so I feel like what you're doing is brave and courageous and out at the edge of, I feel, a movement in our entire culture with the Me Too movement and, the national stage, that you're standing as a woman to say, I am a human being, and these states of vulnerability are actually of interest, not a sign that we're broken, but a whole other dimension of being human, and a rich, lovely dimension, unfortunately caked with taboo and judgment in our culture. But when those are lifted off, oh my gosh, to rest soft and open um, is to open to one's beauty, especially the beauty of the heart.
Oh, yeah. There's so much richness in what you've just said. Like I find myself hearing the last words, the softness and beauty part, and there's a feeling of upliftment when I hear those words. And then I'm also remembering the thing you said at the beginning about the soldier, and I'm thinking of how lonely it is to be a soldier. You know, how isolating inside our little walls of our skin and our roles and our rules about how to be.
Well, you know, my take on loneliness is that it is much more about a disconnection from one's deepest self than it is about lack of people. And there's nothing like the soldier conditioning and particularly the conditioning men receive, but we all receive it, that has us actually cutting off from the organ of connectedness and the organ of unity, which is the heart. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to have a softened, open heart, feeling at one with all things when your body is tensed up and you're a stranger to your own tender um, nature, which is true of all human beings under there.
Yeah. And so that makes me wonder what you might want to share with our audience and with me about how do we work with that tendency in our culture to be disconnected from our true nature, which, as you're saying, that is the source of loneliness from your perspective. How do we work with that?
Well, um, I like this idea of sort of creating a microculture within one's own life. I did this with my child when she was born. I tried to surround her when she was very young and therefore very impressionable until she grew strong with people who, for example, thought that crying was a natural thing, or thought that children were not just pawns to move around, but whole beings to listen to, etc. Um, and so same with us, that we need to find, in spirituality, it's called Sangha, right? We need to find the places, the dead poets, the teachers, the reading, if possible, the friends, the places where a different kind of emergent culture is accepted. For example, if you're at particular spiritual retreats, there will be more of an acceptance around just being and not filling the space with lots of fast speech. And so something about that lets the human being unfold a bit more than we might if we were, you know, at a potluck with people who hadn't been initiated into that depth. So one of the useful things is just to really surround ourselves with things that make us feel sane in the tender expression of vulnerability and heart, and to also I think it was the words of Jesus, don't cast your pearls before swine. Not to say that people who don't understand this are pigs, but the metaphor, to really have discernment about where we unfold the circus tent of our tender heart, of our need, and to pick our audience to be people who are need friendly and warm, rather than where we are going to get aggressively helped back into our soldier suit.
Oh,
And yeah, and this is tricky in the culture, but there are places. I mean, I'm just thinking about 12-step groups, which are free and all over the country, and the whole model of that is to come and to share from your vulnerability, and no one interrupts you, and you can just show that part. And then if you quickly put your coat on and leave, you won't get anybody, trying to help you or sell their product, or because we are as a culture afraid of the open gap. We're afraid of anything that opens in need or in vulnerability or even in rooted simple being. It gives us the heebie-jeebies. We want to shut it up or stuff something in there, or ah, because
Yeah.
it's really the energy that draws us into our deeper depths.
Yeah. So again, you just said so much that was rich. And I guess the thing that stands out for me is, well, a couple things. One is it's it seems like there's an inner and an outer struggle. Like there's the struggle with finding that sangha or that welcoming village outside of ourselves. And there's also a struggle that many people go through in their inner life that would even allow them to walk out the door and enter a place like a 12-step meeting. And so that, I wonder what you might want to say about that.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because it brings up, in a way, the paradoxical nature of being human and the multidimensionality of some of the problems that we face. Um, so one thing I want to say is that so many of us carry pain, trauma, even like developmental deficits. And so connecting with other people can be challenging, and in that case, you know, uh, just that element of feeling like, social anxiety, not knowing how to make a friend, those kind of things, that so has to, to me, what that necessitates is therapy, is actually having a relationship with someone where you can heal some of that. So vital. That's a piece of it. Um, I think also relaxing something inside that we've all internalized, which is that this human walk is supposed to be perfect. And this is another disease of our culture and this soldier training, that says that only the perfect, only the fully functioning, only the high noon sun god, with all capacities firing, is a worthy human being. And everything else doesn't measure up. And what we're finding out as we are real with each other is that the human walk is challenging, and we have imbibed a kind of a harshness toward humanness, human frailty, human challenges, such that it's hard for us to have mercy for the assignment we've been given this lifetime, the place we find ourselves in, the challenges we find ourselves having, that's not an obstacle on the way to our real perfect life. That actually is our life, that we actually came here to wrestle with some of these things. And so, shoot me, I'm a human being. And we find out when we start to listen to other human beings that most human beings are actually human, and most human beings have frailties and needs.
Hello. Yeah.
And so, to me, another way to answer your question is to say, number one, we need to do whatever we can do to work on the pain we carry and the developmental deficits that we have, right? Number two, we need to actually learn how to bring that harshness that we have internalized toward our very human lives and start to soften in mercy. Like, oh, bless your heart. You've been through this, that, and the other thing. This is not your fault. This is not a sign that you're bad. It feels hard. It feels like this, but this is being human. Bless you, kind of like, oh, because on top of feeling lonely, we don't need to then be kicking our butt around the block for the feelings that we have. Like, bless our hearts. We're all, it's part of it's like an intentional design flaw in the human being, that we are fallible in many ways. Then the third thing that I would say is to find resources, even if they aren't people in person, even if they're books or they're online courses or their teachers, find things that reflect back. You are not a broken object destined for the island for broken toys or whatever that thing is. That anything that reflects kind of, and not kind of like, what's wrong with you? Take my 5-step program and you can be perfect. Not that kind of thing, but more the kind of support that says, hey, human, where are you at? You are more than just your thoughts about yourself, and that contains kind of tenderness, whether it's in person or it's not. Our psyches don't always realize that we haven't, after we watch an online talk, that we haven't actually been in the presence of that being. It can be deeply transformative. The other piece to me that we can't neglect is the spiritual piece. And
Yeah. More about that, yeah.
a lot of what we call loneliness is simply, and I would even venture to say about 95% of it, is longing for the holy, longing for, whether you believe in a deity or you don't, um, longing for the ground of being, longing for the deepest in ourselves. And our conditioning sets up a wall between how we are and how we should be. And when we start to turn toward how we are, we open up the possibility of connecting with the depth of ourselves, of entering a kind of a transformational process of being with what we struggle with, being with things like loneliness, and allowing them to almost season us, deepen us. And so in the Sufi tradition, um, longing is seen as an expression of love. It's the yin aspect of love. This it's a wide open heart that's longing. It has the same wide open doors as a heart that's spilling love. It's the same aperture. And so within the Sufi tradition, to actually put attention on longing, to allow longing to deepen in longing, to have the tears of longing. And loneliness is just a form of longing. In fact, probably one of our most familiar forms of longing, because most of us see connection with people as the solution to our longing. But we can also notice that we can have many, many people in our life and still feel profoundly lonely unless we are able to connect deeply and authentically to who we are. And even then, the loneliness, in my experience, persists until the heart turns inside out. And so the Sufi tradition has this beautiful myth of Majnun and Layla. And Majnun is just in love with Layla, and their families aren't going to allow this match. He spends his lifetime being absolutely true to his heart, longing and longing and longing and composing poetry and being outside the walls of where she lives with her husband and longing and singing. And then at the end of his life, his heart turns inside out and he experiences enlightenment because he has taken everything selfish in him and let it burn in the fire of his heart. And so I see, yes, we need to work on our pain, our trauma, our deficits and things. Yes, it's nice to have litter mates and it's nice to have Sangha. But unless we take on in some deep way loneliness as muse, loneliness as almost like a touchstone to allow the longing of our heart to express itself, um, it will persist. At some
Yeah.
point, it will persist.
Yes, and so I really resonate with what you're saying about longing being our muse, and that it can lead us towards what it is we are longing for if we just listen to it and not just listen to our preconditioned ideas about what is going to solve our loneliness problem. the one thing that came up for me as I heard you talking about that was how often the minute we touch that longing, there's like this that happens, and it goes right into what's wrong with me. Like there's some, and then that pain of what's wrong with me kind of derails the whole process of being able to just do what you said, like sit in the longing
Yeah.
and then follow where it's leading. So
Yeah.
I wonder
And
if you might say, how can we work with that?
yeah, and one of the challenges of our culture is that we have conditioned responses to almost all the healthy impulses in us. Um, a lot of the things that have been painted as taboo within our spiritual experience, we have internalized that taboo and then we'll act it out on our own selves. So we start to get near what we call lonely, and then all the guards of the culture that live inside us say, don't go there. If you go there, you suck, and all that kind of thing. So it is very challenging. So in my teaching, I teach people um, a felt meditation technique. In other words, drop out of the mind into felt experience, into breath, into ground, and have a relationship with what Rumi calls yourself outside the field of right doing and wrong. There's a field outside of right doing and wrong doing. I'll meet you there. So this is
Mm.
encountering ourselves below the thoughts about ourselves in the direct experience of breath, of ground, of being, of what is it like to walk down a country lane without engaging the mind. And this is the focus of uh, every spiritual tradition, I think, is how do we direct our attention toward the deeper aspects and resources of ourselves and not just live out of the messages of the everyday mind. So, what I invite people to do, who I work with, is when those messages start, I mean, it's just like harpy o'clock, right? When you venture out of the familiar into something new, the harpies, which are these fairy tale characters who shout horrible things at you when you go into a certain wood. The tales are all just an picturing of our psyches, right? So here come the harpies, what's wrong with you? There's nobody around. And then you spiral down into self-hatred. If you can notice that that's happening and say, hello, harpies, I was expecting you. Your reality is delusional. And I'm going to drop my attention into anything in this moment that's actually more delicious than you, which shouldn't be too hard because almost everything is more delicious than a shrieking harpy. For example, what's it like just to feel my breath? What's it like to notice the felt experience of loneliness? Not just the idea of loneliness, but is there a place in the body that feels hollow? Can you come to that? Can you sit with that and feel it? Can you put your hands there? Can you feel the support of the earth under you? Can you lie on the earth? Can you snuggle your teddy bear? Can you, like anything? But what lets us kind of be with and compost some of those feelings is actually being with them in the creature of the body, which is where they're held, instead of staying up in secondary zone, just kicking our own butt down the street.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is just even in that process of dropping down, that creates relationship, that creates connection, and that
Absolutely.
yes, that is the antidote to the lonely. And I also heard as you were talking, as soon as you said the word teddy bear, like the soldier, the warrior in me said, ew, teddy bear,
Right.
like I had that reaction, like, no, that's too soft for me. I can't go there,
True. And that's the conditioning we all receive. Yesterday, was it yesterday, Sunday, I had finished a retreat, and Monday morning I went out to breakfast with my organizer and a couple other people, and there was a little boy and his older brother sitting by us, and the little boy was probably 4 and his brother was probably 6. and the littler one had a fuzzy little yellow chick. And it was just so dear in the heart to see that this boy had made it to 4 with his softness intact. His face was soft and he was holding on to this fuzzy thing. So beautiful. And that is a human quality, to be able to soften open and appreciate other soft things, to be able to reach your hand out and have it be soft enough to touch the softness of a baby's cheek or someone who's hurting. And I think, talk about actual soldiers. I think that actual soldiers actually experience some of the most close relationships they've ever had in war, because the soldier training breaks down when you're under fire at some point, and one of your brothers is going to be crying because his leg got blown off, or the pressure of what you're actually up against cracks that shell and allows the hearts to be there together. And um, it's too bad that for men, they have to have their legs blown off sometimes to allow themselves to feel that deeply. And it's all about the conditioning that our culture hands them. Um, how beautiful to be able to be soft enough to be touched by a young person, or touched by a flower, or touched by an act of kindness. And it is the internalized feminine hatred. And we all have these, I call it yin and yang. Men and women alike, we all have these energies and these capacities in ourselves. And this yin softness has been all but obliterated in our psyches. And so we have the world we have. We are insensitive to each other, to the environment. We are manning up instead of yinning down. And in some circumstances, manning up is perfect. If you need to run out in the street and save the child who from the oncoming car, you don't have time to process it. You go and you do. And there's sometimes in life that is at just a beautiful energy. But when we don't bow to both, then there's no integration, and then we're miserable and we're lonely and we're wondering where our hearts are because we've sealed them off inside of a metal soldier box.
For sure. And as I'm hearing you talk, I'm sensing all these ripples of connection with many themes that are that I wish we had time to explore. And that's what I love about this topic of loneliness, because as I have discovered, and I'll dare to say this in public, that sometimes I joke with friends of mine and I say, oh, this transforming loneliness project, it's not going to transform anyone's loneliness but my own. And actually, that I have found that that's true, that just in the process of step by step venturing into this topic, rather than being afraid of it and saying, ew, no, not that, just venturing into it, it has opened up worlds of revelation and insight and connection. And there's just more. So I'm really feeling that with you now, that there's more. And I also had an agreement with my audience that our interviews are only so long. So we're going to need to get to wind it down for today. But thank you so much for so beautifully speaking to so many alive and relevant aspects of this experience of loneliness. And I just want to say, is there anything else you want to just say to our audience on this topic, or also about the work that you're offering in the world?
Well, I think I want to say to the audience, I just want to say mercy to your human heart, that if you have loneliness living inside of you, you're not a freak, you're a human being. And to just softly allow it to ache in your heart and notice that you're human, is the thing I would like to say to your audience. And then I do all kinds of things online, in-person retreats. One of my most passionate areas right now is the reclamation of yin and the integration of yin and yang in the human being. And I work with women and I work with men via my events. So And, you know, like everyone else, I have the website and the Facebook page and all that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I
people
do.
know where to find you. Yeah.
Yeah, they can find me. They just myname.com is how they can find me. And you will have you have my name, so that
I do.
works.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Laura, for doing this. I think it's going to benefit so many people.
Thank you, Jeannie. It's my
Yeah.
absolute pleasure to be with you today.